Hi guys, good afternoon and welcome to this video. Last week we saw what IAM is all about, and today we'll continue with that effort, right? Last week we focused more on a few entities. We looked at we looked at the user, the IAM user. We looked at the IAM groups. Today we want to focus on the IAM roles, right? And the role is a very important entity in as far as IAM is concerned in AWS. So today we want to create an IAM role. This is the IAM role we're creating using the IAM service, and we'll attach a policy to that role. So log into AWS, go to this service called IAM, create an IAM role, and attach a policy to that role. That policy will give it specific permissions to do something. We want to give it S3 permissions, S3 full access permission, so that we'll create an EC2 instance and attach this role to an instance, and that instance should be able to make calls to S3, should be able to access S3 without any problem, right? Without access denied. First of all, we'll create the instance without the role, right? We'll create the instance without having a role attached to it, and we'll log into that instance and perform some actions, and you'll see the errors that we will have. Then we'll attach that role to the instance and try to do that same action, and you see that this instance should be able to communicate with that service, which is S3. So from this demo, you should learn what IAM is all about. IAM roles are all about. The difference between an IAM role and a user, an IAM user. These are different entities, and of course you guys should be able to learn what they are and the differences between them. So today let's go to IAM. So if you are in AWS already, you can just search for IAM and go to it. The first thing, as you saw up here, would be to create an IAM, to go here and create an IAM role. So let's go there and create an IAM role. So go to roles. So you go to roles down here. I already created one role, so let me delete, but I will give it the same name here. Let me delete just so we create it afresh. So we'll create role. So you go to create role and select the service you want to create. The type of service you want to create is EC2, because it is an EC2 instance that will use this role to make calls to another service, right? So you select EC2 in this case. This is absolutely important. If you select a different service, it will not work that way. You see, the thing here says allows an AWS service like EC2, Lambda, or others to perform actions in this account. So what will happen when you select EC2? EC2 will allow the role will allow EC2 instance, the EC2 instance where the role is attached, to be able to make call to other services. So in this case, we will attach permissions for the services we want EC2 instance to access. And the service I want EC2 instance to access is S3. So I'll grant S3 permissions to that EC2 instance, right? So the EC2 instance, how will it be granted this permission? Through the role that I'm creating. I'll attach this role to the EC2 instance, so that when the EC2 instance wants to talk to S3, it will have those, it will assume this role, the permissions of this role, and be able to do that action, to perform that action. So I'll just give it the same name that I gave earlier, which is EC2 instance S3 role. So this is a short description. This will allow EC2 instances to call AWS services on your behalf, because we want to trust the EC2 instance to do that action for us, right? So we're granting it full S3 permissions. We are granting the EC2 instance that will assume this role. Any EC2 instance can assume the role, any EC2 instance within this account. So that is what we're doing. All right, let me go ahead and create the role. We've created the role, and this is the role right here. You can see that we've created the role as this diagram shows you. We've created the role, and attached a policy to that role. So we have the IAM attachment that has occurred, and now we'll go ahead and create an EC2 instance. But we will not immediately attach the role to it, so that we test it out and show you once we do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and search for the service called EC2. It's just like a computer. A normal EC2 is just like a normal server, a computer. We'll still come to treat EC2. This is just to demo whatever activity we're doing here today. All right, so let's go to EC2 and create an instance. So go ahead and create an EC2 instance, launch instance. So want to launch one instance, and we'll give it the name Primus Learning Series Instance. That's how we'll name it. All right, so we're naming this instance, and we'll select the Ubuntu type machine. Let's select Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an operating system, right? So we're selecting that type of operating system. And you will need to create a key pair to be able to access this instance. If you don't have a key pair yet, I've created one previously. You can just click here, right? And just give it a name and select the format. Just select PEM here. Give it a name like, let's say something PEM, blah, 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 and just hit create, and it will create. And then the next time you're trying to do it, once it creates, it will download it automatically to your system. Then you have it on your system. Same thing that I did here. So I'll just select this one that I created earlier. And you see, it says you can use a key pair to securely connect to your instance. Ensure that you have access to the selected key pair before you launch the instance. So you have to have access to this key pair to be able to connect to your instance. So what happens once you create this key pair? AWS will store the public one, the public key, and you store the private key. That way, AWS doesn't have access to your account. Nobody has access to it, to the instance, if you don't grant them that access. So if nobody has this access, nobody should be able to access that instance. All right, and we'll create a new security group. This is a new security group we'll create in this instance. And what we'll do is we'll allow SSH traffic to that instance, and also allow HTTPS traffic or HTTP traffic. This is what we'll do. So we're opening SSH to anywhere, which means anybody can SSH if they have this private key pair. All right, that's what I'll do just for demo purposes. And I'll give this here, let's see. That's okay, I think. The security group here will just be named this, or we can change it if we want. But that's just the name it will take. We don't want to worry about the naming and all that. Let's just go ahead. So you allow that traffic. It will allow access to the internet, because also, right, that's why I allow traffic to the internet. Why? Because I want it to have I want to install something in that instance so that you see that it's working. All right, the rest look good to me. I want it to be as basic as possible. I don't want to do anything on the networking side. So you see where it says the IAM instance role. This is where we would have selected the role that we created, which is this role, you see, to attach to this instance. But I told you we don't have to do that because we want to test something out. We will test from this instance, and you discover that this instance will not have the necessary actions or the necessary authorization to go and access S3, because we have not attached this role to it. But once we attach the role to it, it will then assume the permissions of that role and be able to call as S3, right? So that is what we want to do. So enable GNS there, and the rest should be fine. Let's see, let's make sure that everything looks good. IP host name, yes. Nope. So we're not selecting enable resource this, yes. Select instance recovery. No, we're good, we're good. The rest should be fine. That's what we want. All right, on this section, I want to add a script, a user data script, and the script will just give us a web page, right? I'll show you what the script is doing. This is a simple HTML script or simple installation script, bash script that has HTML added to it. So what this script is doing, it will update the instance because it is an Ubuntu instance, right? That's why you see us running apt here. We'll install Apache on it, which is a web server, and then we'll cut this information, this HTML page into its index.html. And this is a basic HTML page which displays some information nicely. And then once it displays that information, it will add a button, a vote button. And once it does that, so this is just HTML. Once it does that, it will start the Apache server and it will enable Apache so that it's running. This is all what this script will do. All right, so we can go ahead and create this instance. Let me see if everything looks good. Let's go ahead and launch this instance. So the instance is taking its sweet time. Remember, we haven't added a role to this instance. So this instance should not be able to access S3 directly. So let us go to S3 and create a role. Oh, sorry, and create an S3 bucket. A bucket is just like, an S3 bucket is just like a drive, right? Like you create a folder in your drive and somebody can access it. S3 is object storage, used for object storage, right? You can see Amazon S3 is an object storage service that offers industry-leading scalability, data availability, security, and performance. And it is really robust when it comes to storage. You can store files in there. You can do anything you want inside S3. So we'll create the bucket and call it Primus Learning Series bucket. We'll just give it a name. This name has to be globally unique, guys. It has to be globally unique. Else the bucket will not, AWS doesn't allow names to reoccur, right? So you see, bucket name must be unique within the global namespace and follow the bucket naming rules. So if you don't follow the rules, it will not create. And we'll leave these other things the same as they are. We'll still treat the S3 service. We'll treat this service fully, so don't worry about that. We'll go ahead and create. So we've created a bucket. We can upload things inside this bucket, right? So you see, you can store files inside this bucket. I can actually add files from my local machine to this bucket. We'll query the file. So I can go to my downloads maybe and just add a file called tutorials, AWS tutorials, right? That's the PDF or the PowerPoint thing we're using, and upload. And that's it. I can download, upload, download. This is how it is, right? So we've created an S3 bucket and added some data inside the file or inside the bucket. So this is the bucket name. You need this bucket name to be able to access it later. All right, so we've done that. We've created the EC2 instance. Let me show you what we've done. We've created the role, the IAM role. We've created the EC2 instance. We've attached the IAM policies to the role, but we created this instance without attaching this role to the instance. So currently, this role right here is not attached to this instance. And so you will not be able to access S3 directly from this instance because this instance currently doesn't have that permission to do that. So let's go back to AWS and just go visit that instance and see if it's up and running. So the instance is up and running. And this is the instance. So it's still trying to initialize. I just installed some things on it. Let's see if the things work that we installed. it will take a sweet time because, yep. So this is what we installed on it. Welcome to your AWS instance tutorial. This is the best tutorial, yes or no, and then you can vote. So this is just a beautiful landing page that I created for this tutorial. All right, guys, I will share the code with you afterwards. You can use that code to do your own thing, to add it to your EC2 instance once you're creating, so that you have it beautiful like this. You can do your voting app with this if you want. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to that instance. So what we'll do is we'll access this instance. I want us to connect to this instance. And to connect to this instance, remember you need that key pair. So SSH into this key pair. Sorry, SSH into this instance. You can just copy the SSH command here, right? And remember, our key pair is found where? It's found in our downloads. We downloaded the key pair on our download. So you can just go into your download and then CMD in your download, and you're able to SSH into that instance. So just place that command here, right here. You see, I've placed the command here. And if I run that, I just need to hit enter. And then it'll ask me a question, say yes, and authorize me to access the instance. You see, I've connected to that instance. I'm right here inside the EC2 instance. You guys can see that I'm inside the EC2 instance. So I can clear my screen here. And you see, I've connected to that instance. I'm able to connect to that instance because I have the key pair. I opened port 22. If you don't open that port 22, which allowed SSH traffic, you will not be able to access the instance. So we did that, and we'll go ahead and test this out. AWS S3 LS. So we need to install the AWS CLI. Version 2, we don't have it yet. Sudo install. So let's run this and see if we can install it. So yes, just run that if you have that error, because you need the AWS CLI installed. Remember, the last time we were accessing we did AWS configure using a user. Today, we don't want to use a user to access services in AWS. We want to use an IAM role. So you see the difference? I will not do the AWS configure and then I put the secret key and secret access key. I will not do that. This instance, what we'll do to it is we will simply attach a role to it, and it will assume that role and perform actions, right? The first time we are just running, we will not use anything, right? So let's just clear this screen. We will not attach any permissions to this instance. So if we do AWS S3 LS, let's see what it gives us. Unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. You see, it's not seeing any credentials. It doesn't see anything on this instance right here. So how do we then access S3 from here? How do we even list that S3 bucket that we created? And the S3 bucket name that we created was Primus Learning Series bucket. I think this was the name, and will tell us nothing. So what we need to do then is to go back to this instance. So let's go back to this EC2 instance right here and attach that role to it. So you can modify this instance, right? You can modify this EC2 instance the way you want, and you down here you'll see that there's no role attached to it. So we will go, let's see, let me show you. This is the networking part, and the IAM role not there. So let's go, see, IAM role is empty. There's no role that is attached. So what we'll do is we'll go to actions here and go to networking and go to attach a role. Let's see, to modify a role or something. Is this under, yeah, modify role? That's under security instead, modify role. So go to modify role and select the IAM. Remember the role we created? This is the IAM role we created, and we gave it full S3 access. So we need to attach this role to this instance. This is what we're doing right now. So we've attached that role to that instance, and we're back in that instance. An error occurred. You see, this is a different error now. We've had a different error. This permission, you've seen that these permissions are now, it's able to give you a different error, no such bucket, which means we have probably not given the right bucket name, right? So let's go to S3. Let me just duplicate this page and go to S3 and get the right bucket name. You see the permissions are actually working, right? So this is the bucket name. Permissions are actually working. So AWS S3 LS, want to list, that command is just to list the bucket, right? And you see, it's listing the bucket and even showing you the content of the bucket, guys. Now you have permissions to list and even see whatever is in this bucket. You can actually put data inside this bucket, because this instance right here currently then has access to AWS and other services. You can write to that bucket, you can do things inside that bucket from this EC2 instance. So if we go back and remove that role, you lose that access. You will not be authorized. This service, this IAM service, or sorry, this EC2 instance service will not be authorized to perform calls or to make calls to another service, which is S3. So by this, you're seeing the difference between IAM roles and IAM users, right? You're able to see, if we go back to IAM and go to this, you see the difference between IAM users. Remember, with the user, we created this user and we have permissions, constant permissions on this user. You see, an IAM user is an identity with long-term credentials that is used to interact with AWS in an account, right? While the role is short-term. It is short-term. As it's at the moment that you're calling, right? We're calling this S3 service, that this instance is assuming that role, and that permission will disappear after about an hour, I think. So if we look at this permission and look at the maximum time, look at the maximum session duration, 1 hour. But you can modify this session duration. So if you go here and do that and increase the session duration, you can give it 12 hours. That means this instance will have 12 hours permissions to query this thing, to query that instance, or to talk to that instance, or to make calls to that instance. This is absolutely important that you understand, guys. So the difference between roles and users is the role, you can attach that role to any service that you're creating in AWS, and that service will have permissions to perform actions on the other service that you want it to perform actions on. So it is very important that you understand that difference and know that you know, you need those types of permissions. So if you go back to the EC2 instance, if you go back to that EC2 instance right here, and detach these permissions, the role that we added. So if you go and detach that role, go back here, go to security, modify role. If we detach this role, no IAM role, and save, and just say detach, right? So if we detach this role, what happens is this instance right here, you run the command again, you will not be able, you see, unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. If you run AWS configure, it will then ask you for a username, for a secret access key, and for a secret key and secret access key, which will be what a user does, right? But you saw that we did not do that here, because we assumed an IAM role instead of the user. So you can create roles in your AWS environment and assign those roles to users, to different services, or to different services within the AWS environment. And those services should be able to perform actions for you. Users can also assume permissions or assume roles to do things, right? So a user can be given the permissions to assume that role and perform some actions. So it's absolutely important that you understand. And to learn more about this, you can go to AWS IAM documentation. So if you go to IAM documentation, AWS, just say AWS, you should be able to see all of these and learn more about it. It's absolutely important, guys, that you learn how this works. Go to the user guide and read through it. This should help you better understand what these permissions do, users, the difference between users and roles, and so on and so forth. This knowledge will help you a lot as you walk through the other services, as we walk you through the other services in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and delete that instance. So this is the instance here. We'll go ahead and delete it. We are done with it. So terminate. And you could perform the same actions, right, using code, right? This is code. I just tested this out a moment ago. Let me clear my screen. So you see, you could do this. So here you need just two files. I don't need this file. I think I deleted that one. I can delete this file, right? Move it to dustbin. I don't need it. I don't need this one as well. Delete it. Move it to the dustbin. I don't need this one. Delete it. Move it to the dustbin. And I don't need this one. Delete it. Push it to the dustbin. So you see, all you need here, this is with Terraform. So I told you, you will be creating resources using different methods, right? So you could create the same EC2 instance using Terraform. And this is the Terraform file. Remember the Primus Learning series folder that we created. We have a Terraform file inside called main.tf, and I showed you how to download and install Terraform the last time. I have added the user data, which is what we added to that instance, right? On the user data section, we copied and manually put it there. This time, this one would run from here. So what this file is doing, see what it's doing. All it's doing is we are getting this provider. We told you there's thousands of providers for Terraform, right? For HashiCorp Terraform, and Terraform uses these providers to connect and make calls, make API calls to the services for that provider. So in this case, we will be installing the AWS provider, which will give us access to our AWS environment through the role that we create, the user, sorry, we created a user and gave that user full permissions to access AWS. So the first thing we are doing here, we want to create a resource called IAM role. So we're using AWS IAM role. We want to create the role called admin role, right? And the name of the role is admin role. And this is you see, this role is able to be assumed by different services. So this is the STS assume when you want to assume a role. So this is standard. And then this other service that we're creating is we're simply attaching that role, the IAM role, which is already existing because we have the administrator role and it's one of the AWS managed roles. If not, if you created a role, you would just give it the ARN here, right? You just add the ARN here. So that's the service the resource we're creating on this second step. On this third step, we are creating a security group, and the security group will allow inbound traffic, right? And then we're using a particular VPC. This is just our default VPC. We will also learn all about VPCs and what they do and what they and all that. And then we are allowing all this traffic, this incoming traffic. We are allowing port 22 to be open to everyone, and we are also allowing port 80 to be open to the internet and everyone. And we're allowing egress traffic to the instance. So this is going out this is coming into the instance, this is going out of the instance, allowing internet access to the instance. And then here, we are just creating the AWS instance, right? Which is the IAM, which is the EC2 instance. This is the AMI for the instance. It is an Ubuntu instance, and we use the script called user data for userdata.sh for the user data section. Remember when we're creating the instance manually, we went to instance. Let me show you that section. Went to instance and clicked on instance, on create there, and then went down to advanced, and we saw the user data section, this section. We copied the user data script and put here. Remember, this is the section we're defining here. So we're saying we need to install something in this instance, and the file is called userdata.sh, and this is the file here. And then we'll name the instance Primus Learning Series instance. That's all this file is doing. And this one is basically doing what I showed you: installing Apache, updating the EC2 instance, installing Apache, and then just cutting or writing an index.html file in the /var/www/html/ and then the file name in this location. And this is all it's writing. It's a simple HTML page, and it will be a voting page where you can just vote a couple of things, right? And here we can modify it a little bit and just say, welcome to your Primus Learning AWS instance tutorial. AWS, let's call it series tutorial. And then this is the best AWS tutorial series on the internet. Yes or no? Let's put this yes or no. And then this is the voting part, right? We're using the voting form. And when you vote here, it'll be sending you to a back end, but we don't have a back end, right? This is a simple page. We don't have another page or a back end to use. So once you hit the vote button, it will not go anywhere. It will just give a blank page for you. And then we're doing all of that. And this is the end of the file. That is defined here, and we're simply starting the Apache service and enabling it. That's all we're doing. So if we run this thing, so you need to be in the folder, the Primus Learning Series folder, and make sure that Terraform is initialized. So you do Terraform init. Let me make sure these files are saved. Do Terraform init and initialize it. So you see it's finding the latest version of HashiCorp AWS provider, and it's installing the HashiCorp AWS provider version 5.41.0. That is all it's doing. So from this, you can already figure out what it's doing, right? And then it tells you it's successfully initialized it and everything is ready to go. Now let's do Terraform plan. You can directly apply, but you want to see what is happening when you run a plan on this, the number of resources that will be created and all that. So we are just doing that. Now it says it will create 4 resources. You can scroll up and see the resources it will create and all that. But let's go ahead and run Terraform apply -- auto approve, since we said we don't want to be saying the yes after that. And we'll go ahead and create our EC2 instance for us. You see, as it's creating, remember, we told you there will be a file. You create a log file so that nobody else somewhere can run this thing at the same time. And then it will create a state file where it will capture the state of your current AWS environment that is managed by Terraform. So you have everything that you've created. All the resources here will be defined in your state file. This is not a good practice to save your state file in your local environment, because if you delete it, you have deleted your whole thing. You will need to re-import everything. So you want to store your state file remotely or somewhere else in an EC2 or in an S3 bucket. So you could store your this in a back end that will be in maybe in S3 or something, right? So if you look at the state file, you see all the resources that are inside. Look at a lot of resources. These are, so secret resources that you don't want open like this. Somebody can mess with them. And so you can just put them in S3. You define that in a backend. We'll learn that when we're doing Terraform. All right, so we've created an instance. Let's go into that instance and see if it's running. So if we do this, you see that there's an instance that is initializing here. And if you go here, you see the IP address of the instance, which has been created. And if we run it here, we should see that things are beginning to shape up. They are installing, they are doing a couple of things. You see, this is the voting app. So it's installed that user data for us. You see, this one was quick. This is the recommended method for creating things like EC2 instances and doing everything right. So this instance has the necessary things that it needs to be able to function as expected. And if you go to this instance and go here, go to networking part, oh, sorry, the security part is the security part. You should see it doesn't have a role attached to it. So we can then go ahead and attach a role to this instance. And you can do that from your code, or you do that directly from here. As far as the security groups are concerned, you see the security groups I was mentioning. We opened up port 22 and we opened up port 80. That will permit us to access this instance, right? So you can SSH into the instance and you can view this instance on a web page because we allowed HTTP access. All right, so that's it about this instance. We can go ahead and destroy this instance right from here without going into the console. So you do destroy, Terraform destroy -- auto approve, and it will just destroy everything that we just created. So you don't need it, destroy it, that's it, right? So you see it will destroy this instance and will not have anything here. You see it's running the destroy, and will go destroy every services, and you will not have to manually go in and destroy services directly. You have to run them directly here and destroy from your terminal. You could also create it using the CLI, but you see that there are so many things that you need to pass, right? So with the CLI, it will take, it's not very nice to create this type of thing with the CLI, but yes, you can do that with the CLI. So this is the recommended method. So it's destroying, should take just a couple of seconds more and wrap up the destroy. All right, so it's done and the destroy is complete, and that's it. So to wrap up, guys, today we're just looking at the other part of IAM. So we're creating an IAM role, attaching a policy to that IAM role. That policy had S3 access. We created the EC2 instance, and initially we tested it out without attaching the EC2 role that we created on that instance. Then we attached the role and tried to access S3, and it worked. The first time it did not work because the EC2 instance did not have permissions to make calls to S3. The second time, the EC2 instance then had the permissions to go in and access S3 and make calls to S3. And we identified the differences between the IAM role, the IAM user, and the IAM groups, right? So this difference should be very clear in your mind. Learn how to manage IAM roles and users and groups, and you will become very good in AWS, guys. So this is just a practical example to show you how to do that. You can develop this on your own, read more, and you should be very good in this. Thanks, guys, for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate your support. We really appreciate you jumping on to leave us comments and your thoughts on our videos. We'll continue this series the next time, and we'll look at more services, right? So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.